going to talk about the trade surplus and the yuan levels right now with Bob Kapp. He is the former president of the U.S. China Business Council. He is joining us on the phone from Port Townsend, Washington. Bob, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You probably heard what Sarah just mentioned there, in that the trade surplus for China is heading towards $200 billion a year. Is that going to change the conversation as far as any punitive measures that the U.S. could take against China?
Deirdre, remember the name is Kapp, K-A-P-P. No, it's not going to change the conversation, because the conversation is already, at least the conversation in the United States, is already very harsh and is demanding action to bring this, to try to bring the surplus down by unilateral U.S. action. Will it change the conversation between the U.S. and China? That's a little different. There's a lot of pressure now on the Chinese to reset the RMB gradually upward, and I have a hunch that over time we will see the RMB improve against the dollar, but the Chinese will never say you made us do it, and that's why we're doing it.
Well, we did see the yuan forward surge to their highest levels, as you just mentioned there, Bob, a two-year high yesterday. So is that a sign, as Sarah alluded to, that the market is already pricing in that China will yield in some way to the pressure from the U.S. or from Europe?
I suspect it is. I'm not an expert on these particular matters, Deirdre, but I suspect that is the case. There is a tremendous effort underway now, not only by the United States, but by major economies all around the world, to get the Chinese to gradually appreciate the RMB against the dollar. And as I say, I think that if it's going to happen in ways that don't give credit to anybody for doing it under pressure.
So, Bob, what is the most likely scenario then? Because we know you are an expert at U.S.-China relations. So what's the most likely scenario, the most likely compromise?
I think the United States, once we get the election out of the way, and I think that's very important, I would urge everybody to keep his wallet buttoned when he watches commercials about China, until their political ads, until this election is out of the way. I think the whole conversation will settle down a little once the politics are not quite so intense in the United States, and then we will see the United States and China resuming the dialogue on the broad range of issues on which they do and must cooperate. And the currency matter will, I think, resume a kind of a more normal, serious, but not quite so central place in the U.S.-China dialogue. There's a great deal that the U.S. and China have to do together on lots of other fronts, and room for progress on some of those.
So maybe after elections, then, we're going to hear less and less of this so-called currency war. Some economists have pointed out that it would be more damaging to China. Do you agree with that?
Well, it certainly wouldn't do them any good. I mean, you never know once one of those things gets going where it's going to end up. And there is the possibility along the way that if somebody acts in a way that the WTO doesn't permit, the WTO over time could come in and say, no, you can't do that anymore. So you can't tell who's going to get hurt more. It's a subject that we really shouldn't be plumbing, and neither should the Chinese. I might say the Chinese are sounding very cocky these days, and that doesn't help. They are arguing that the United States is becoming a sort of a spent force. What are you going to do about it? That kind of if you will, arrogance on the part of the Chinese in at least public media statements, the government is somewhat more cautious than that, do not help this situation at all. But we've got our own flamboyance that the Chinese can point to all the time as well.
Yeah, it seems like always room for heated words on both sides. Bob Kapp, thank you so much for joining us. Bob Kapp joining us there. He is a consultant, and he is the former president of the U.S. China Business Council.